Hello and welcome to Bible Study at Faith Church. It is Thursday morning, it's 10 o'clock, and glad to see everybody that has joined in with us already. As we usually do, why don't we start today with a song. This one I picked because it does have kind of that little Celtic flair to it, and we just had St. Patrick's Day yesterday, so this is Be Thou My Vision. Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me save that thou art. Thou my best thought by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. High King of heaven, thy treasure thou art. High King of heaven, my victory won. I reached heaven's shores, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Let's begin with prayer. God, you're the center of our faith, the center of our lives. You are our vision of the present and of the future. We ask that you would open our eyes today, help us to see your will for our lives, your goodness throughout all creation, and how close you are to us. We look forward to reading your word today. We're so grateful that you have spoken to us generation after generation, and ask that you would still speak to us today by your Spirit. We pray in your name. Amen. Well, we want to welcome everybody. Let's take just a minute and let's say hello to Bob and Carol, to Brenda, to Diane, and as well to Jimmy and Pandora, Karen and Mike, and Diane. So good to see everybody here today. We are, I guess I touched something. We are continuing to read our book for Bible study, God is Closer Than You Think, and we've worked our way up to chapter 7 today. And we will do like we did last time. We're looking for some kind of a combination of me sharing Bible study and my own thoughts and ideas, questions, and then having your input as well. That's always been what Bible study is about. And we're trying to find just the right combination of ways with technology and people to make this work. So we'll do this again like we did last week. And I will be sending a link to you at the end of our study today if you'd like to join in a separate conversation on this topic today with questions and comments. And it will be, I'm using Google Meet. It's something that you can use in a regular web browser, or if you're using a mobile device, you can use an app, the Google Meet app. I'll just send you the link. Just click it. You can join. It's pretty easy, and we'll see how it goes today. So we'll be ending a little bit before the hour, and then we'll continue. So why don't we start with our first? We're going to start with our first kind of quote here. This is taken from chapter 7 of God is Closer Than You Think, and good morning to you, Jay, and we also have Debbie and Maria that have joined in just in the last few minutes here. So we're first looking at chapter 7. This chapter is on spiritual pathways. This is a quote from C.S. Lewis, and this is kind of a good summary of what we'll be talking about today. Why else were individuals created but that God, loving all infinitely, should love each differently? So this is one of the big mysteries of the way that God works with us. There is one God, but God is not like us in that each one of us are finite, and each one of us are limited in not only our lifespans, but in our personalities. We are not all personalities. We may have different parts of our personalities that kind of rise to the surface or kind of take dominance one day and then another aspect that takes dominance another day. But we don't run the full spectrum of all possibilities, whereas God, because God's infinite, God does. We are a reflection of God. We're made in God's image. I do remember reading, this was a missions textbook when I was in seminary, and I don't have the exact quote, but I have the basic concept for you. And that is that God has shown himself through each one of us in a unique way. And that means each and every one of us who have ever existed on this earth that he has created. And that means each and every individual has shown forth some aspect of God's image to those around. And it takes all of those together, those present close to us and around us in life now, as well as those who are alive everywhere on the planet in this moment, as well as all of those that have ever been alive at any point. It would take all of those together for us to see God reflected in each and every one of those people, for us to just get a glimpse of the eternity and the depth of who God really is. So God using creation to show himself, and he continues to do that. Now we're going to be looking at our author for this book has kind of broke it down into 7 basic or dominant pathways, or we could say like personalities of faith, and we'll be looking at what those 7 are today. Here's another quote from the beginning of the chapter. Our individual uniqueness means that we will all experience God's presence and learn to relate to him in different ways. Let's read that again. Our individual uniqueness means that we will all experience God's presence and learn to relate to him in different ways. Now, we do share a lot of similar experiences, of course, but just like going through life, if we're not even talking about faith, but we're just talking about the way that we live life, each of us experiences life in a very different way from those around us. We may find people who are close to us in terms of temperament or personality, and we can kind of see that person seems to be experiencing life in a very familiar way or very close to us. But there are so many varieties of perspective, and that goes also into our experience of God's presence. So we can sit in a group, a Bible study group, we can share with one another, we can find common ground, but at the same time, we're also going to be learning and hearing people's experiences that might not seem exactly like ours. So God's doing this. We can see God using this to help us to understand God more fully, and we can see that because God is so vast and infinite, God is going to need an infinite amount of people to show forth who he really is. And let's continue on here. And also remember, because we're doing a slightly different format today, we'll go through all this teaching at the beginning, and then we'll do our questions and comments with Google Meet at the end. Along the way, you may want to be just kind of making some notes so that you can make sure that your questions and comments don't get lost between now and then. Let's look at this next as we're getting ready to look at the 7 different pathways that we have in this chapter. Certain pathways most resonate in you. There are the ones that may open up a whole new level of connection between you and God. Each pathway has certain dangers attached to it as well, and we will note those too. So as we go through these 7 pathways, you start to see that some of these resonate. Some of these seem to be your pathway, or several of them may seem to be your pathway that you primarily prefer or are most comfortable with or just naturally relate to God. Some of the other ways may seem foreign or may seem like they may seem that they're not something that you would enjoy or you would want to be your pathway to relating to God. Yet you may recognize that there are other people around you that's their thing. So the first one is the intellectual pathway. And the intellectual pathway has to do with analytic and problem-solving modes. An intellectual person will be always hungering for new information, reading a lot, maybe listening to lectures and sermons. Sometimes you can, if you find a good teacher, you may latch on to a certain teacher. So this is an intellectual pursuit of God. There are, theology and all of the thoughts of the great theologians throughout the centuries of Christianity might be something that you would find inspiring, and you just want to know more. And this is primarily an intellectual endeavor. It's not an endeavor of the emotions. It's not an endeavor that needs to include other people. This has to do with kind of getting to a rational understanding of who God is. Now, as a person of faith, anyone will understand that matters of faith, you can go so far with a rational understanding, and then you kind of hit a ceiling, or you just are left with unanswered questions. However, for the intellectual person, that ceiling can be so high that it's worth trying to get to the top of the ceiling. And if you've ever read commentaries, some of the really scholarly commentaries on the scriptures, if you find those to be insightful and you like it, that you're in this intellectual pathway, if you find those to be uninspiring, dry, or even heretical or confusing, then this may not be your pathway. Now, some of the downsides of this pathway is that we can get caught into a relationship or a path of all head, no heart. Dallas Willard once observed that it's extremely difficult to be right and not to hurt anybody with it. So that can be one of the downsides of this intellectual endeavor, is starting to get to a place where there are rights and wrongs in understanding of God. So, this is kind of like the world of debate happens. and a person will formulate their argument on why God is this way, and they're going to defend themselves against the person who thinks God is that way. So it can get into this I'm right, you're wrong kind of an attitude, and that would be one of the downsides of this pathway. If we go to the second pathway, it is a relational pathway. And the relational pathway is related to people. It is, if we look a little bit further, people on this pathway tend to hear God speak to them in a conversation, more in a conversation than from a book. And so this is, in this pathway, this is not a pathway that's done alone. This is a pathway that always involves other people. And so a person who experiences the aspects of God that's inspiring to them and that feeds them, it comes through relationships with other people. It's in that context that the relational pathway takes place. And so it's not something that's taken from a book, and it's not something that's taken from individual time. It's in the family, it's in the friends, it's in the church community, and also it's in the way that we relate to God, not relating to God in reading what's been written before, reading the ideas that have been written about God, but it is in the same way that you would relate to other people. You're talking to God, and God is talking to you. So this is relational. Now, the downsides of this pathway is, he says there's two. One is superficiality. That would be where you're spread so thin that you can't get past yourself. So you're always, in relationships, you're always presenting yourself, and you're always engaged in back and forth. And so if that's happening constantly, it can be kind of this getting into a mode of always pouring yourself out, always showing yourself to be, whatever your personality is. And in groups, it might be harder to really show the depth of who you are, and so you're not getting the depth of that pathway as well. And also he uses this word independent. The second things to guard against is to be dependent on others, so that you live as a kind of spiritual chameleon. So you're one thing one day and one thing the next. So that's the downside of this relational pathway. And again, each and every one of these has a good part and a part to be aware of. The serving pathway, that's the next one. And the serving pathway is it's another way to relate to God. This is like what we would see in the works of Mother Teresa and working for the poor. It can be working within those in need within your own family, your friends, your church, your community. And the teachings of Jesus, where he says, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done it to me. We've talked about that pretty recently. And it's in those exchanges of serving someone else, of being there for them, of helping to see that needs are met that have not been met. It's in serving that this pathway really comes alive, and you're experiencing God in this way. And of course, there are abundance of scriptures that talk about this being an important pathway for us. This is the pathway that Jesus talked about when he was at the Last Supper. He served them. He washed their feet. And so obviously that's an important thing. Some of the downsides is it can be a challenge for a person who is used to serving to learn how to receive love. And it's also a temptation to resent other people who are not serving as much as I am. So those are the two dangers. And there again, this is kind of similar to the relational part. It's easy to get it down a pathway where it's primarily us giving, it's pouring out, and there's a need for us to both pour out and to receive, whether it's intellectual understanding or relational experiences of God. We need to have both. So if we're used to serving, we can be in this mode of pouring out, and in the process not learn how to receive. And it can end up being dry and end up being, and then again, there's resentfulness here too. There's a temptation for that, because if you're spending your life pouring out and you're looking around and nobody else is doing anything, you may feel that I need to redouble my efforts because I have to make up for all the laziness of these people around me. It kind of sounds like the Mary and Martha story that we've read recently. So the next pathway is the worship pathway. And this is another one of the 7. And this is rooted in an experience of worship. Worship is not it's not an intellectual endeavor. This is more of a heart experience, and it is something that is closely associated with music, and it is about singing the praises of God. It's about thanking God, and it's a very positive and uplifting and joyful type of a pathway. And there are worshipers that because this is their pathway, that is the thing that connects them with God. It's not through relationships as much, and it's not through intellectual endeavors as much, or through serving as much, but it's in being in this state of worship and praising God, and that's where the pathway comes. So the two downsides of this pathway, this is similar to the challenges of service, and that is judging people who are not outwardly expressive as you. So if you're a worshiper and you see people around you and they just look like statues, and it doesn't look like that they're having any kind of an experience with God, because they're just standing there. There's no tears in their eyes. There's no joy and smile on their face. They're not even moving around. So there can be a judgment if we don't see other people experiencing that. And then the next thing is, it's possible, because worship does give one kind of a high and this a good feeling, then there's a tendency or a temptation to go from one worship high to the next. And so it's a lot of ups and downs. It's going to church on Sunday and having that great experience, and then by the time the week has passed, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to get back to church, otherwise I'm just going to die. I need to get my God hit. I need to experience the presence of the Holy Spirit. And so it can be a kind of an up and down experience. And if the experience is what's important, then it's like it might be going from place to place to find where that's happening, because not every church has a worship high to offer that might resonate. So there can be some journeying along the ways. And then of course I mentioned before, this is very dependent on music. So if music is not a part of the equation, then it could be difficult to go down that pathway. If there's conversation or even silence, that's not the same as music. All right, the next one is the activist pathway. The activist pathway, and the way that this is described in the book, this is a person who has the activist pathway means challenges do not discourage you. You see challenges and you get excited. You don't turn the other way. It's almost like you're looking for a good fight. You're looking for a problem to be solved. You're looking to fix something that needs to be fixed, and it's in that pathway that you're kind of working with God to make changes in this world. And he doesn't mention it here, but this can become kind of a political action type of a thing. A person can say, I look at the problems of society around me. I know that Jesus addressed the problems around him, and I'm going to fight to make sure that the rights are the wrongs are made right, and I'm not afraid of challenges. So you need a cause, and you devote yourself to the cause. The downside to this and doing this is there's a possibility to run over people or to exploit them to get that mission accomplished. And so along the way, because the activist is making sure that justice is served, sometimes people get in the way of that, or get brushed aside, or get run over. This is I think of the prophets. The prophets were activists. They weren't afraid to stand up to anybody to make known the will of God in that moment. And there takes a special person to be that prophet and that activist. And so that's that pathway. The next one is the contemplative pathway. This is a person who's an observer in life, a contemplative. And so there's not a need for other people. It's not an intellectual endeavor. There need not be music and praise and partying for God. There doesn't need to be some challenge to focus. This is a person that observes all of the things taking place around, and to see the hand of God and the work of God in the things around, and to focus on that and to see that come to life. It would feed a person who's a contemplative on this pathway. The downsides to that is sometimes if you're a contemplative, you may need permission to follow your pathway. To the outside observer, the person who is the contemplative is not doing anything. You're not relating to people. You're not worshiping. You're not serving. You're not, all these things that have been mentioned already, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there. So isn't that a bad thing? Isn't that like a lazy thing? But this is a very interior experience that is a quiet one, and that doesn't need everything around. A person can observe those things and be in contemplation with God. Needing permission might mean that person on the pathway recognizes that everyone around is looking at them, and doesn't recognize that they're on a pathway themselves. They're not just sitting there. They're on a pathway just as involved and focused as anyone else, and so needing permission would be one of the challenges there. And it says you may need to stretch yourself in the area of relationships, because any one of these pathways, if we get stuck on it, we're missing out on all the other ways that we have to relate to God and to grow. This next one is creation pathway. And I thought, when I was first reading this, I thought this was more creative pathway, but this is not. This is creation pathway. So what that means is that you find a pathway to relating to relationship with God through God's creation. So it's in creation around that a person immerses themselves. And, in some ways this is intellectual. In some ways this is relational. It's just not with a person, it's with the things around us that are living that are not other people. And to enjoy those things, to protect those things, to enjoy and to use these things. Someone who is a farmer might naturally fit into this. And we need folks that are enjoying creation and having creation be the center of their life, because that's what we all depend on for sustenance, for food. If we didn't have creation around us, we wouldn't last for very long. So understanding how much God is giving to us, constantly giving to us food to eat, and air to breathe, and sunshine, and all of these things. That's the creation pathway, and to appreciate those things and to enjoy them is where this person finds their niche. The downsides is it's possible to use this pathway as an escape from everything else. So we might be escaping from people, we might be escaping from intellectual endeavors, we might be escaping from serving. We can get into creation as a part of escape, and part of the challenge is to realize, as he says here, people are part of creation too. So if we love everything in creation, but we don't love the people in creation, we can find that this pathway is not really. We're being a little hypocritical. We're loving every part of creation. If we don't love people, then we're missing out on the things that God has created for us. So let me just let's finish up here. See if I have any more notes. Let's look. This is toward the end of the chapter. These are some words that the author's grandmother shared with him when asked which of her 6 children she loved the most. She said, "It's as if when each child is born, another little room gets added to your heart, and no one else occupies that room. It doesn't have to be bigger or better than any other room. It's just theirs." So this is a great explanation of the way God would love us. Which does God prefer? Does God prefer the worshiper, the activist, the server, the one that's involved with creation? What does God prefer? Well, let's look at our, you're already looking at it. In my Father's house are many rooms, Jesus said. And this is a great text for us to look up. And let me just go ahead and John 14. And we'll pull up our Bible Gateway. And let me just make it big enough for everybody to see. All right, so this is John 14. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms, and of course I think it's the King James or more traditional is many mansions. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, I would have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you with me, so that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. Now this is one of those texts. This is often used at a memorial service or a funeral, where it's these words of comfort that God is preparing something for us. So this can be a very forward-looking text, in that wherever we are going in life, and typically we think of as after I live this life on earth and I'm gone, where do I go? Well, I'm going to the place that God is preparing for me. And the words of comfort are, he says, if I were not preparing a place for you, would I have told you that? I've told you I'm preparing a place for you, and I will come and I'll bring you into this place. Now this is one of those texts also, if you look in different English translations, you can see that this word rooms, mansions, a lot of folks are saying this is heaven. And I remember, growing up and hearing this text, it's heaven and there's many mansions in heaven. It fits with the golden streets and everything perfect. So we're thinking of like the very best that we could ever have, and that's what God is preparing for us. But I've also seen this text to be looked at as, this is about compartmentalization. This is about the way that God shows himself in different ways. So God shows himself in different rooms, And if we're looking at this idea like we did in this text today, God is expressing himself in a multitude of ways. And there are a multitude of ways for us to find that pathway to God's heart, because each of us is not complete in our image of Godness. We have our little special piece, and it's through that little special piece that we make the connection, and then after that, God kind of embellishes us and grows us to be more whole and more complete. So this is it's a good text for us this is a good one to meditate on, to read in a couple different translations. If you're going to do some study of your own, this is a nice little one, and you can kind of pick up on different things along the way. This that we read this morning is the New International Version, but this is John 14, verses 1 through 4. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and wrap up our time together here in this teaching portion. Let me go ahead, and I have copied the link, and I'm putting this in the comment section now to join discussion. And there is the link. And I am also at the very end here. I'm afraid to do it in the middle because I haven't done it yet while we're live. I don't want to disconnect if I start to edit the main heading. But at the very end, I will try to post this link in the description of this video as well. So I invite you to join us on Google Meet. It will take us a minute or two to get set up. And so you'll be asked, would you like to join? And accepting you to join the group may take a minute or two. Just be patient. We will connect with one another. And if you're not able to join us, thank you for sharing with us today. And I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Let's do our sending song. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to the world. May each thought and word bring glory to your name. Send us out in your Spirit, Lord, we pray. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to the world. May each thought and word bring glory to your name. Send us out in your Spirit, Lord, we pray. All right, thanks for joining, and look forward to seeing you as a part of the group. Give us a minute or two, and in the meantime, take care.